I'm a technology evangelist for CData Software. We're a leading provider of data connectivity solutions. What that means for Couchbase users is you get standards-based drivers for Couchbase. So Odbc connectivity, JDBC connectivity, ADO.NET providers, if you're used to developing in .NET, Excel add-ins. We have specific adapters for Excel. We have adapters for PowerShell, niche adapters for products like MuleSoft. The list goes on. So what I'm going to talk about today is performing business intelligence over Couchbase Analytics. So most business intelligence tools speak SQL. Couchbase Analytics speaks SQL++. So there's no direct connectivity between most BI tools and Couchbase Analytics. Our drivers provide that interface. So how do we do that? So we actually do the very terrible thing of making Couchbase look relational. So we take all of the wonderful things about NoSQL and we get rid of them. But what that does is it gives you the opportunity to look at your Couchbase data through a relational model. So you get tables with rows and columns, which is exactly what you expect to see if you're doing business intelligence, if you're in a BI tool like Power BI or Tableau. The way that we do this is we work through your application. We take the SQL query that's generated by that application. We run it through our drivers. We translate it to the appropriate NCL or SQL++ query, send that to Couchbase. We get the response from Couchbase. That gets processed through our drivers again, formulated as a tabular model, rows and columns, and that goes back into your application. So you get to work with your Couchbase data just like you would any other database. So the key features of the drivers, we can connect to both NCL and SQL++, so it's a simple configuration to do so. It's live data access, so we're not replicating your data. Our drivers are installed, so you're not having to worry about us pumping your Couchbase data through a service. The data goes from your Couchbase server directly to the client machine. We can access on-premise and hosted Couchbase instances, so whether it's in the cloud or a local instance of Couchbase. And we do query pushdown. So as much as possible, we will translate the SQL query into a NCL query or a SQL++ query that can be processed by the Couchbase server. So we're leveraging all of the processing capabilities, all of the joins and the aggregations, the filtering that's available within Couchbase through NCL and SQL++, instead of pulling all of the data and then trying to churn it. That said, in some instances, the tool that you're working with may generate a SQL query that doesn't have a direct correlation to NCL or SQL++. It's in those instances that we do some optimized data processing. So our engineers have worked diligently to be able to process JSON data essentially as quickly as it comes across the wire. So as quickly as Couchbase is spitting back JSON data, our drivers are processing it and building that tabular model of it so that you can work with it in your BI tools and other custom applications. So that's kind of what we do. That's who we are. The bulk of what I want to show you guys today is actually demoing the use of our products. So I'll walk through what it looks like to connect to a Couchbase instance, what it looks like to configure a driver, and I'll do that as permitted, as time allows. I'll do it through Tableau, through Power BI, in R, using RStudio and our JDBC driver, and then in Excel. So configuration of the drivers looks very similar regardless of which technology you're using, whether that's Odbc or Power BI or Excel. But anybody that's familiar with those standards, the configuration will look familiar to you as well. So before I fully jump into the demo, let's see, I'm this way. So let's talk a little bit about how CData tabularizes that data. So this is our Connect data set. This is the set that was built in analytics. This is a location object that's sitting in that location data set. So we have all of those fields. As you can see, we've got the location object that has the latitude and the longitude. This is not something that is tabular. This is not a table, right? That's the whole point of Couchbase, right? It's NoSQL. It's not SQL. So what we do is we'll go through and we'll flatten it. So when the data comes back to you in your BI tool, instead of having this raw JSON object, we'll drill down and flatten the objects as you configure when you connect to Couchbase. So there are options for not flattening. There are options for flattening objects, objects for flattening array, or options for flattening arrays. The other thing about NoSQL is, yes, question?
Basically, denormalizing, right?
Right, yeah, so the question is we're denormalizing, and yes. So one of the things with JSON data is there's no typing. Couchbase query, the query service has the infer. And in that case, we can use that command to kind of get some data type information if it's enabled on the service. If the infer is not enabled on the service, then what we do is we'll row scan. So we'll pull a sample of documents from either the data set if we're working with analytics, or from the bucket if we're working with the query service. And we'll do some intelligent data typing. So despite the fact that when this information comes into our driver, the zip is a string, lat and long are strings. As long as all of the instances of those fields are parsable as integers or parsable as doubles, then when we return the table metadata, we say, well, lat is a double, long is a double, zip is an integer as needed. We can parse out date times, dates. So if you're working in a tool and you want to build some sort of linear model over time, and there's a date time associated with your data set, then we'll parse that out. So one of the nice things is that you can configure, no, that's too small, how the data gets parsed out. So forgive the wrapping here, the resolution changed on the projection. So as you can see, this is a schema file. It's written in a proprietary scripting language, easily understood for anybody that's kind of working on the back end doing the development side. You can see the different fields. So we actually parse out the document ID, and we treat that as a field, as a column. So you can organize your data in that way if you need to. So, but the other fields show up. You can determine the type. If you know that location ID is supposed to be a string or it's supposed to be a double, you can configure that just by editing the schema file. Of interest is this other path field. So you'll note that our lat field, the lat column in our table schema here, maps to the location .lat field from the data set. So we're using the dot notation that Nickel and SQL++ users are familiar with to map the flattened objects. And we actually do the same thing in arrays. So here's an example of a rates document. If you haven't seen this before, within the rates document, there's a rates array that has the different rates that are available. We flatten it. We use zero indexing to build the column names. And then the schema is going to look similar. So we create column names based on the indexes of where that field is in the array. And again, you can see that other path attribute in our table schema maps the field, or maps the column to the appropriate field in the document. So that's a really like in the weeds example of how we drill down into the NoSQL data in order to build that tabularized model that you need for BI and analytics. So without further ado, let's take a look at connecting. So I'll start with the Odbc Driver. It's probably the most ubiquitous data connector. It's usable across the Windows environments. Mac and Linux have begun to add support for it, and we have those additions as well. So depending on where you're working, we should have the Odbc Driver for you. So if you're familiar with Odbc, there's an Odbc Driver administrator. This is just a tool that collates all of your configurations to different databases. I have a ton of sources installed. So let's take a look at our configuration for Couchbase. So we're using standard connectivity objects. So we need to be able to authenticate. We need to know where the server is. If you have configured your analytics server to run on a different port for security reasons or what have you, you can configure that. If you don't have an analytics service running, but you have a query service running, then you can use the Couchbase service field to change which service you're connecting to. So am I talking to Nickel or am I talking to analytics? And then within this, there are a series of other configuration options that allow you to determine how the data comes back to you. So if you want to flatten the objects, you set the flatten objects connection property to true. If you want to flatten arrays, then you tell the driver how deep into that array to flatten. We leave this as a discrete number. We don't want to do an unlimited flattening of an array because you may have objects that have thousands or millions of objects within an array, and the processing time required to do that would be astronomical. By the time you're getting to BI, you kind of have a rough idea of what your data set looks like and what you want to analyze. So there are other options as well. If you are working in a tool where you can actually configure your own query instead of allowing the tool to create the query for you based on the manipulations that you make on your visualization, we have a query pass-through option. So you could write a raw nickel query and push the raw nickel query down. You could write a raw SQL++ query and push that down as well. So that's certainly an option if you're developing your own tool or you're working in a tool like Excel or you're working in R where you know what query you're going to be able to build. So with our connection configured, what we can do is actually look at this in Odbc. So there's always the option to test the connection to make sure you've got everything right. So hooray, it worked. Live demo success. So let's take a look at what it looks like to connect in Tableau. I'll walk through that process, and then I'm going to pull up a pre-configured dashboard to kind of show the full demonstration of what's available. In the interest of time, to make sure you guys see everything that you can. All right, so to connect in Tableau, we're going to connect to another database via Odbc. Maybe. Classic. Resolution change. Awesome. All right. So you would select the driver and then sign in. I wish I could show you that. It's not going to happen. That's fine. So let's open the pre-configured connection, and then maybe I can walk backwards in that and show you guys what it looks like. Okay, so maybe? Okay. So what I'm actually waiting on, and that was it. I did not have to wait long. Because the connection is live, it's going to talk to the Couchbase server every time it builds the visualizations. Is this gonna, there we go, close enough. So what I've done is I've built several dashboards to map different things. So let's back up. So let's look at the data source. So when you connect, you'll have configured your connection to your Odbc driver, and then you can go through and it processes the data sets as tables. So you can select the table that you want to work with. So in this case, I'm working with a location. If I knew that I wanted to build a model based on related data, you can do that in Tableau. You could drag things over, and it would build that relationship. If it's not the relationship that you thought, then you can go in and configure it. But for this, so all I've done is I've built a heat map. So Tableau is intelligent in that it will process a string column, and if it looks through and it recognizes that everything in that column is a state, then it will map that to some sort of location mapping that can then be processed to help build your visualizations. So what I've done here is from the locations, this is just a heat map of the diligent rental agencies by state. So as you can see, Alaska does not have many. California has a bunch. And I've done the same thing for the Superior brand, for the Underdog brand. And then just for fun, I built a stack bar chart that shows everything, so across the data sources. What's great here is that this dashboard, I filtered by Underdog, and that filter gets pushed down to Couchbase. So I'm only going to get Underdog locations back. So I'm not asking Tableau to filter. I'm not asking your client machine to filter. We're going from there. So the final dashboard has everything involved. And then you can actually, with Tableau, you can work with your visualization if you want to do it as a demonstration. If you're building a report, it does drill down. And what's happening here is Tableau is actually making new queries to ask for only the Alaska data. And then all of that information is getting pushed down to Couchbase and then coming back. And again, all of that filtering gets pushed down, minimal information processing. So that's Tableau. In the interest of time, I did want to show RStudio, and then I can come back. Power BI is a very similar experience to Tableau. The reason I want to pull up RStudio is that I have some saved scripting that demonstrates a join. So you can build that relational model based on that. So if you're used to connecting to data in R or in RStudio, then this will be familiar to you. If you're not, then just bear with me. There will be, it'll look a little bit like wizard magic. Just trust me as we go through this. So if I can, so maybe, come on. All right, so I know I want to use JDBC. Just like I would have in Tableau, I tell R what driver to use. So I'm using the JDBC driver. This is our JDBC driver. You connect. And then just like with Odbc, you're going to configure your connection using those connection properties. So you tell it which server to talk to, the credentials to authenticate. This is I can't find my mouse now. Wonderful.
What's the live demo without glitches.
That's right. All right. Let's see if I can. All right.
There you go.
Yep. So this might blow up. We'll see how this goes. Okay. Yes. All right. So if it'll let me scroll up. Oh, so the connection string is there. It's going to have your connection properties: user, password, server. If you want to configure other things, so I want to flatten objects, I don't want to flatten objects. It's talking to a different port. There are logging options as well. You can do all of that. So the crux here is the query. So note I'm selecting from the location data set and the rentals data set. I'm going to do an ANSI join because SQL++ supports that, which is awesome. You're no longer bound to keys and indexes to do all your joins. It's that ad hoc query that analytics is great for. And then I've got some filters. I only want the locations in California. And what I'm looking at here is the total number of rentals by car manufacturer for all of the rental agencies in California. So you can see the tabularized results in the scripting pane, and then we've built a bar chart that does the same there. So that's that. And I think I'm probably right at the limit. So let me pull up the last slide. I'll be happy if you want to find me in between. I can show you Excel. I can show you Power BI as well. The connectivity is the same. The experience is very similar. So takeaways is you're getting standards connectivity. So if you want ODBC, you want JDBC, you want Excel, you want PowerShell, you want Power BI, we offer it. You get the query pushdown, so leveraging Couchbase Analytics processing power as much as possible. And then if something is crazy, if it's a really complex, weird query that analytics can't support, which is basically none of them, then we'll do some optimized query processing on the back end. So free 30-day trials for any of our products, cdata.com/driver/Couchbase for more information. Yeah, cool.